I was gonna say, like, let's give her a Christmas gift.
But she's never experienced anything
Okay,
like that.
second session of the first day of the fourth weekend.
But you were saying taking me up where somewhere that wasn't Manchester.
The Sebastopol native trader store.
Oh yeah, with the caribous.
It'd be nice to have you up there. Not Shasta. Okay. Oh, this
Once
is.
we make that happen, I'll still have my 15% discount.
It would. I mean, if you could like sign up for it sooner rather than later, is sort of more within the spirit of the thing. Rather, that's why it's for anyone who wanted to do the constellations for individuals class. Okay. Here, I'm looking for this. That's what I'm looking for. Okay. Oh, it's a now the written one does work. Ah. Okay. Which is so much more helpful because trying to track whether things are in the video while not being able to see the video is very difficult. Okay. So, what I just want to say one thing about anyone's very, very difficult decision about what the primary anything is. Just one thing as I was sitting there thinking about it a bit, this is an advantage you guys have in two ways over Tanya, having had the NLP training and being native English speakers. You know the difference between in a noun, a regular noun, versus what's called a nominalization. Nominalization. There we go. And it showed up beautifully in the difference between body and health. I just wanted to say about that. Health is a nominalization. And the question is, how do you know what a nominalization is if you can put it in a wheelbarrow? Theoretically, if you had a big enough wheelbarrow, you could put a body in a wheelbarrow, but you can't put health in a wheelbarrow. It's not a thing. Like this. Yeah. Right. So like nominalizations are justice and grace and beauty and helpfulness and all that sort of stuff. And when I was feeling into it, generally speaking, I think this is probably not a hard and fast rule by any means. But if you have a choice between a noun and a nominalization, the noun is going to be closer to the primary feeling. This is just my guess.
Nominalizations are more abstract usually.
They're more abstract. They're derived from verbs and adjectives.
Right.
So they are not themselves intended to be nouns.
Right, but that's very confusing because
Right.
In a structural constellation, you kind of go with nominalization more.
You might and you might not.
Same rule?
I'm not even talking about structural constellations right now.
Yeah,
Just if you're having a choice between things and you're trying to get to the primary feelings, my guess is that somewhat more often the primary feeling is going to be connected to the one that is not a nominalization. And it like all such rules, there's probably plenty of exceptions. And, you know, I can imagine doing a structural constellation on my body, health, and free time. I don't know, right? What's the relationship between those three things? Yeah. But I just was sitting there thinking, why is body landing more heavily for me? Health is a nominalization. Can't put it in a wheelbarrow. Body. Anyway, so that's a generalization. Just came up to me. Okay, so constellation meditations. You've heard me say this about other kinds like mini constellations. Whenever you're creating little exercise formats, the way you get to a constellation meditation is to back engineer it, which means what is the outcome you want from your meditation? That's where you want to start, right? When you're creating a constellation meditation. Is it, to have a better experience of money? Is it to have more health? Whatever it is. So the first thing is your back engineering. And what that means, because this is a generic, you're going to do this meditation for a whole group of people, theoretically. You're going to be working in your principles around orders of love, principles around, whatever, like when I do my money one, I have some principles around sort of a more beautiful world, economics kind of stuff comes in. If you were doing something on relationship, you might bring in some nonviolent communication principles, right? So whatever principles are useful and important to you in your work and what you're doing with the people that you're working with. If you're doing health for people and it's around nutrition and eating, you're probably going to bring in some principles about good nutrition, right? Okay. There's a few things as you're putting together your meditation. Again, it's generic. The whole thing is generic in the sense that, except for radical outliers, it's going to apply to everyone you're saying it to. Everyone's got a mom and a dad. Having said that, you've probably heard me say things like, if you have adoptive parents or step parents, this is how you, recognize, like usually what I'll say in the group is something like, we're going to focus in on biological parents. For those of you who have adoptive parents or step parents, this is not to do them any dishonor. They're very, very important to us. And if you don't know all the people who we're going to include in this meditation, just allow the field to bring them into your presence without worrying about what they look like or things like that, right? Because immediately you'll start getting objections like, well, I never met my grandparents. I don't even know who they are or what they look like or what their names are if I start inviting them to imagine their grandparents, right? So it is generic, but you want to put in things that allow them to customize it as part of the process. So that's what I just gave as a good example of that, right? Or it could be you include moments like, so imagine a representation for money. Whatever comes, this is one of the advantages of meditations. You're not limited to human bodies. People might come up with a dollar sign or a pile of cash or a blob of energy as a representation. So whatever comes to mind for you is a representation for money, particularly people who are not trained in constellations and if you haven't labeled it a constellation meditation, they'll be less inclined, particularly with non-human representations, to imagine a human in the role. They might see a unicorn as money, or the Grim Reaper might show up as money, depending upon what their issues are. So that's a way that they can customize. You really do need to think about those moments where you need to give enough room for people to bring in what is theirs. I had a great learning years ago. You know me, I borrowed from Carl Buchheit having the ancestors on bleachers, which is a very useful kind of thing because it creates rows and people are behind people and you can see them and you can imagine a very, very wide set of bleachers. Finally, someone who had been doing this with me a very long time finally admitted, I can't imagine bleachers. Just totally doesn't work for me. I said, thank you for telling me that. I didn't realize that for some people, bleachers might be hard to put in their brains. And I said, how about a hillside or banked clouds? And she went, oh, clouds. I can do clouds. I can put them on clouds. Yes. And so I learned to give people a couple of options at the bleachers moment. Usually I say like a hillside because I think hillside's kind of easy. And then I'll say, or whatever helps you see them well, that kind of thing. Like, who would have known bleachers would be a problem?
You know, I am usually not this person, but I'm like, I hear that. I think some people just have to be difficult.
Well, and she went through probably 5 meditations before she admitted to me, I really want to let you know I'm really having trouble with the bleachers. So she wasn't being difficult. She was really like, it's just, you know, it's like the pee under the mattress. You just, it needs to move. And she finally admitted it to me. She was very nice about it. And I learned something about, you know, keeping things customizable. Having said that, this is connected to it. It's not, well, it's connected to that. Think about where resistance might understandably arise. Things like, notice how much your parents loved you, right? I would hope none of you would make that mistake, but we do have this rule in constellations, you know, underneath everything, all parents love their children, all children love their parents, right? So we might get sloppy and say, look at your ancestors and notice the love coming from them to you. And they're sitting there going, fuck my ancestors, you know? It's just setting off all their resistance. So you really need to, if that's what you want them to experience by the end of the meditation, then you're going to have to work with their ecology. You're going to have to really presuppose some of the places, the obvious places where resistance is going to come up. Some people will take like that, like ducks to water. They really will. Like, oh, it's so nice to feel this. This is so great. But you need to like either build up to things or give people bunches of options. One thing that I've been known to do on some occasions, if it's going to involve like imagining them behind you and supporting you, this is one, again, I've stole from Carl Buchheit. If it feels just still a little too unsafe for you to do that, just imagine a nice block of plexiglass between you and them. It's just keeping you safe for now. You know, it still keeps it clear. They can still see it. And that usually minimizes the fight, flight, and the resistance that's really making things difficult. So, and the other thing is that every time I do something like that, they'll probably give me 1 or 2 others, in a sense. Like, they become less, you know, prickly. Like, oh, she's going to keep me safe through this. And then when another one comes up I'm not as careful about, they may not get as reactive. Like, I'm sort of letting them know that this is a safe process. You want to target your audience. Obviously, you want to know or have an impression of whether these people know constellations or not. If they don't, then you've really got to walk them through the process. Something like step into the representation for money could completely baffle, that instruction could completely baffle somebody, right? Or, you know, or even the sentence, imagine a representation for money, could just baffle people. Remember, my guess is like 5 to 10% of your people have been in workshops and have been told they're not good at visualizing things. I can't tell you how often I run into this. So they have a story about how they can't visualize. You're not going to unpack all that, right? So you just, you may have a story about visualizing. Just don't worry about it. Just let it come. Whatever comes through is great. You know, that sort of thing. Now, I sort of, for me, I feel like there are 2 types of these kinds of constellations. This is for me. The most amount of meditations I've experienced are my own. So it's what I have to go off from. And one is like the all ancestor. You know, for me, it's the ancestors on the bleachers kind of thing. And if it's the money one, you notice the ones that were rich and were poor, the ones who worked hard, the ones who didn't work hard, the ones who stole money, the ones who were generous, it's the all ancestor. And I've done that for some really beautiful things, like really good one I did once was the topic was business and worthiness. And so I just set them all up and took them through a process to find where the sense of being worthy, having worth, where did it get interrupted? Somewhere up there. So that's the all ancestor ones, which in a sense is different from what we do because we never have enough representatives to do all the ancestors, right? Versus, sort of the particulars, which you can do. Your business, your father and your mother, that kind of stuff. Over time, I found these two feel kind of different to me. And yes, they can be combined. What I'll often end up doing is, like, if you imagine like the bleachers or the hillside, and all of the, the ancestors are up here. And so there's a sense of like some presence of the ancestors. And then the client is down here looking up at all that. And then there's some set of interactions with other figures, whether it's money or parents or whatever. This is like the constellation space, but it's kind of under the presence of the ancestors. So I've done that as well. And even like, can you find the one ancestor up there? You don't have to worry about who it is precisely, just somebody who had a problem like the problem you have. Could you invite them down to be with you? And then I'll lead them through an interaction with that person. And then in the end, I'll send them back up into the bleachers where they belong, that kind of thing. Practice makes perfect. The more you do, the easier and more useful they get. And even if you don't have a context in which you want to do these, doing them today, doing them at other times, it builds other constellation facilitation muscles. The context in which you would do these, for me, the big one for years and years and years and years was my monthly free business call. So I'd pick a theme, worthiness, all those things we come up with in business. I'm having trouble being visible. I can't price things. I can't organize myself. I hate planning, I'm always poor, the things people have. I would set a theme and people would get attracted to, niching. I want to do something on niching. And then I would come up with a meditation to walk them through around that issue. More and more as the months and years went by, they became more consistently, it's what I knew best, it's what I did best. They were really ancestrally oriented kinds of exercises. So the context is, telecalls, online video, or if you find yourself invited to talk, as I did several years ago, like 10 practitioners of various stripes got together, gathered people together. We had one of those, free events that we all upsold to. Not my favorite event in the world, but I talked for a while about NLP and constellations, and there were 30 people in the room, and I was able to walk them through one of these. So they did a constellation. All of them did a constellation. So it's really good for that kind of a context as well. It's whenever you're dealing with a large group. Now, you can do this with an individual. There's no reason not to do it with an individual. Having said that, if you're going to spend the time doing 2 hours with someone and doing a constellation, then it makes more sense to do an actual constellation, but for whatever reason you want to do it in the mind rather than as footprints. And then it's not generic at all. From the very beginning, it's their constellation. Having said that, there have been times when I've taken bits and pieces, like doing an NLP session or whatever, and just inserted a little, can you imagine all your, your ancestors behind you right now? Or can you imagine all the ancestors behind the little one in that memory imprint or whatever? So, yeah.
Can you say more about back engineering?
Back engineering, yeah. So you start out with your outcome. It's like,
Can you say more about that?
yeah. So, just to use the analogy, I want a bridge that goes from San Francisco to Oakland, right? That's what I want. It's going to carry 1 million cars a day, and it needs to last 50 years. And, it's going to have a budget of, that's all a bunch of criteria. And then you back engineer the bridge that is going to meet those outcomes. So, on these business calls, so my theme is niching. So what do I want for people around niching? Well, one thing I want them to all do is to stop being so anxious about it. So that's one thing. I just want to lower a lot of people hear the word niching and they go, ah!
What is niching?
Oh, I'm sorry, focusing your bit. Yeah, so constellations for chronic illness or whatever. Yeah. Yeah. So that's one goal, is to have a friendlier relationship with the word niching or whatever they want to call it. And 2, maybe give them some baby steps on doing some discernment around what their niche might be. That seems like 2 useful outcomes. So I go underneath it and I'm like, okay, what is the resistance to niching anyway? What the hell? What's the big deal about it? Okay, it's something about being specific. It's something about being seen. It's something about, being available. Some people, and there are a bunch of different ones, but I've heard some people say, if I start being successful, people are going to come, and I realize I don't want them to, or I'll have too much business and I'll be too busy and I'll get tired and I won't have a life anymore. So all of those can be in there. And so the main one I land on in there is kind of the movement that sends meerkats back into their holes. It's the fear of predators. It's this movement, right? So then I'm going to back engineer a constellation. Where did fear of being seen and available and out there and whatnot get started? So and then I would, I'm, for instance, I could do one of the bleacher ones. And I say, just imagine the ancestors, blah, blah, blah. Who actually really stood out in their life and got in trouble for it? Just let the field reveal to you. Don't worry about the story or the faces or the name. Is it kind of on the right side, kind of on the left side? Is it like 10 rows back? Is it about 2 rows back? Yeah. And then, hopefully something will really light up, or they'll actually know the story, right? And then, we'll do the whole, can you bow to them, honor the dignity of their fate, notice it was a long time ago, all the classic constellation movements. That's what I mean by back engineering. What's the outcome? So hopefully by the end of it, something in their whole system is relaxed about sticking their heads out of their holes and being seen. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yeah, you want to start out with the outcome and then try and figure out. And here's the deal. I know clients who are afraid of niching. It's insanely common. So I can step into that fear really quickly and get a sense for the systemics of it in a very generic kind of a way. It would be much harder for me to back engineer a constellation meditation on applicants to the astronaut training school who have been turned down 10 times. Because I don't know those people. I don't work with those people. So there's something about engineering a meditation for a group of people who have a problem, a desire, a need that you have some. I mean, the whole idea is that you're bringing an expertise and a knowledge to this in the first place. right? So that either means, you know, I'm an expert on chronic illness, I'm an expert on business, I'm an expert on depression and anxiety or whatever, or doing something even higher level generic, which is you're just doing constellation meditations for people, and your outcome is just to connect them up with their ancestors in a really generic kind of way, which is perfectly fine too. But then that's your outcome. Okay, what prevents people today from being more connected with their ancestors, and how to help them get there? I'm still seeing question marks over your head.
Yeah, it's very abstract for me.
That's why I'm going to do a demo.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions before I do that?
I mean, I've gotten some practice with this, just doing that. Come into Constellation and noticing that you're all here. Just kind of leading to do stuff like that.
So I'm sorry, a little louder. I'm
Sorry, I've done practice doing this just with people coming into a constellation, and like a little meditation to bring them into the space.
Right,
Like you've done, you know,
Yeah.
the ones behind you, like all of that.
right.
So that's the foundational piece, and then adding the specifics. Kind of how I look at it.
Right.
Or if you're doing a particular, I haven't experienced of you doing a particular one. Like you and your mother and money, or you and your father and money.
That's interesting. Okay.
That I can remember, but I can get a sense for that.
I have piles of those from my business calls, because I just did them so
I
much.
only did one of your business calls, I think, like ever. Maybe
Yeah.
two.
Kept on pestering people to come join them because they're so useful. Okay. So, what's a topic y'all would like to have a meditation on? And then as I do this meditation, you're going to have a slight dual consciousness about it. Have experienced the meditation, but also like you're watching a meditation for your own learning as well. And forget about constellation. I mean, it could be about constellations, but forget that we're doing a constellation meditation. What is a topic that you would like us to feel better about together?
Constellation facilitation success.
Got one suggestion?
I would just say being more visible.
Okay.
Comfortable.
Okay.
You go with Peter.
I'm sorry?
I will go with Peter.
You like that one too?
Something like that.
Invisible in my business.
Right.
Yeah.
And what is visibility for you with respect to?
Same kind of thing, visible of whatever expression of whatever I'm doing.
So not necessarily business, or is it work related?
Could be work related. Business that didn't exist yet.
Oh, so you're
Something,
okay. What
something.
might be going on in the future?
Yeah. Or whatever. Yeah, visibilities.
So I want to get a sense from the group, because these are on common space, but they're not exactly the same. What I'm feeling into underneath it is something around being my full heartfelt self in my work in a way that can be really seen.
Yeah, very much.
Yeah. Because that's in some ways the theme, right, of this course is the world doesn't need another constellation facilitator like Leslie or Michelle or anybody. It needs you.
Wow. Yeah, for me, being myself has more charge than being seen, even though they go hand in hand.
Well, and I was thinking of speaking my truth was actually
Mhm.
that one of the reasons I said being visible. So what you said totally.
Okay. And we've been talking about this for months, yeah. Okay. So I'm just going to do, now, obviously the process I'm going to engage right here is quicker than what I would expect from you because I've had some experience with it, but I do need to do a little process.
Are you going to take us through your internal steps? Or
Oh yes, that would be nice. Or
Okay.
later, or
Okay.
later,
So
or later.
I'm still feeling into it. You saw my first step,
Yeah.
which was to really get a clear, like, again, it's a primary feeling thing. So I think you all offered up, something real, but we went a level lower that, thank goodness, was something that is in common. And now I'm just sort of stepping into ancestry somewhat generically, not just mine, just the fact that we all come from people. Like what would interrupt that? And I want to burst into tears. There's what was that? It just came through really strongly all of a sudden. I feel a little bit like I should have my Black Lives Matter t-shirt on. It's that experience of racial knowing we don't matter somehow. There's something like in group level, we can't be who we are, or will be either marginalized or literally destroyed. And dealing with that generation after generation. Now remember, in terms of your clients, it could either be the people who are on the receiving end of that, or it could be the perpetrators of that. It doesn't matter. Now it matters in terms of naming it, but it doesn't matter in terms of the experience. At the Mount Shasta event, there was a woman who said she was Mexican-American, and she's like, I don't know what the thing is, but my whole life I've been really attracted to Africa and Africans and African-American culture. I keep on asking whether we have any African in our backgrounds, but I don't think we do, which is the obvious thing that people say, right? They're wondering, like, is there some back there? And I said, is there any chance your people oppress Blacks? Her eyes went really big. and we had our answer kind of immediately. So we can have the experience of the victim as a systemic entanglement with the victim's experience in our family. And it does matter whether our people were the perpetrators or the victims. It's not like that doesn't matter. But in terms of the outcome for us, it doesn't tend to matter much. Which is why a lot of people are walking around going, I don't understand why the hell I'm having such a victim experience of life. My people have been in charge for generations. Okay. But that's really the place where I go, like, where would the most high stakes being myself, the highest stakes for being myself, in the face of which the four of us are like, we want to yell at ourselves, get over it, for God's sakes, compared to whatever they had to deal with about being themselves, right? Which would mean death or torture or loss of liberty or having to live in hiding or whatever it was. That's where I go.
Thanks, it's really helpful.
And this is the place where, a client will say something like, yeah, my mom couldn't go to college. She couldn't be herself. I'm like, no, honey. Honey, no. And constellation work, that's psychodynamics, it's Freudian, it's very useful. It actually is relevant, but in this space, we're always talking about some bigger trauma than that, always.
It's like the diet trauma. It's like the diet trauma that came down through the generations.
And it can be, you know, if you grew up with a mom who is perpetually disappointed by her prospects in life, that will make childhood difficult for you. You know, it doesn't matter, but it's not what we do constellations about. Okay. And then I'm going to lean on what I've done, which is the thing on the right, the little picture on the right. And then from there, I can't tell you because I'm going to do it, and some of it's going to come out in the process of the doing, and we can debrief it afterwards. So yeah, just find yourself, which is a funny thing to say given the topic. Just return to yourself. And these are phrases I borrowed from Mark Silver at Heart of Business, which I really like. Just notice what you're feeling. Probably close your eyes, but whatever works for you. Notice what you're feeling. There's always plenty of space for whatever you're feeling. Don't have to change it. And then please imagine yourself in a large space. It could be an indoor space, outdoor space, it doesn't matter. Just a big space. And in front of you is a hillside or a gigantic set of bleachers, just something that slopes up in front of you. And at the bottom are your parents, standing in front of you at the bottom of that set of bleachers or hillside. And behind them are their parents, your grandparents, 4. And then behind them, their parents, 8. Behind them, their parents, 16. Behind them, their parents, 32. Behind them, theirs, 64. Notice how wide the line is getting. Each row gets really, really, really wide. In about 10 rows, you have over 1,000 people in a line. These are your ancestors, the people from whom you've come. Some who are happy and some who are sad and some who are rich and some who are poor. Some of them are sinners and some of them are saints. Just notice your people. Then bring into your heart your personal desire. You can name it for yourself inside of your mind, inside of your heart, the way you want, around this wanting to be yourself thing. Around business, around work, around life. It might have something to do with visibility, being seen. Just name for yourself what it is that you would like and how it is now instead. What seems hard about being yourself in the world? Perhaps particularly with respect to work. And just bring that into your heart with curiosity. Again, you don't have to change it or make it any different. And then look up at your ancestors. And some of them had a really easy time being themselves because of the circumstances of their lives, but some of them didn't. For some of them, being themselves was a matter of life and death, or perhaps at least of great suffering. May have been dangerous for them to be themselves. Or they may have been, and many of us have these in our ancestries, they may have been the ones who made others have a hard time being themselves, what we would normally call oppressors. Most of us have a bit of both in our ancestry. And just as you stand there with curiosity, just notice a few pockets of your ancestry that seem to have had the hardest time with being themselves, for whatever reason. Is it more on the left or more on the right? Is it about 4 rows back or 10 rows back? You may know the specific stories, but most of us won't. Most of us won't even know what the stories are, and that's okay. Just going to get an impression, allow the field to manifest to us an impression, a sense, an intuition of the ancestors who had a hard time being themselves. And you may have begun to notice a special bond of love between you and them. Maybe uncomfortable, but it is understandable that we might wish it to have been different for them. Or if they were the oppressors, we might be cranky about them. We might have other uncomfortable feelings. Just notice the bond. And however far back it is 3 rows or 5 rows or 10 rows, notice how long ago all that was. And imagine them saying to you, it happened. It's over. We are at peace. Now, if what you've been noticing is your parents, they may still be alive for some of you, and it's not over for them. Just notice for whoever came before them. It's over. And if you're feeling brave, I invite you either inside your heart or literally physically with your body to bow to all of those who preceded you who had a hard time being themselves. And to say, I honor the dignity of your fate. Please bless me as I choose a different way. And hear them say, of course we bless you. And I'd like you to imagine behind the ancestors, which is often hard to imagine because the ancestors, there's so many, but even bigger and more beyond them, even bigger forces. We might call them angelic or the spirits of your ancestors. Just something even bigger than the ancestors, kind of around them, way bigger than you and bigger than your ancestors. Who can see your ancestors for who they are in their heart of hearts, beyond all of the accidents and particulars of their histories, and who have no judgment. But just love for each human being who comes to this world. You just stand there and you be real small and notice these angelic beings doing this for all of your ancestors. All of them, but particularly the ones who may have had a hard time being themselves or made it hard for others. And let them do the job. And from your place looking at the ancestors, you can notice that there's nothing you can do to keep all of them from being exactly who they were. No matter what, they ended up being themselves. Inevitably, always. Just like us. We are always ourselves. So I invite you to open up your heart again, perhaps with a little bit of bravery or courage, to the life, the particular life that your ancestors sent your way, that showed up in this very particular arrangement of genetics that is you. Unique. A mix of all these people who were themselves unique. And you might imagine in your mind's eye turning and facing the other way so that you can feel your ancestors at your back. Face forwards towards life. And all those unique threads of life that are your ancestors manifest themselves in you in this moment. And notice them encouraging you into your freedom to be who you are. And we respond with a yes. in honor of you, I do it. Take a moment, just receive that life. Allow the specifics of the meditation to disperse, leaving the best part in your heart. And come back to the present moment at your pace. So one of the other things that's really important for you to realize when you're doing these meditations, and then I'll get a little feedback from you guys, is that there are people for whom it will be like, mwah. They've just had the experience of their life. And other people, there's stickinesses. There are things that, you know, it just didn't quite, and that's just the downside to these. It's just the way it is. And so it's usually useful to have a little bit of Q&A time afterwards, where people who had magical experiences can share, I just feel like I released all the pain of all my lineage and I'm feeling new. You know, they can do that. But also I'm explicit in, you know, if there's anything sticky, let me know. And then I can often just do like a minute or two with them around the sticky bit, so I can find what it was that was sticky and help them with it. And to really accept the fact that this is a very useful, powerful format that does have its limitations, right? It's not, you know, it's not the same as, you know, bringing in that specific abortion from that specific brother, you know, all that sort of stuff, right? So how was that for you? What did you notice before we break for lunch? Huh?
I feel like I almost fell out of my chair asleep, dozing off like until a certain point, and then I feel like I went deep in for part of it, and then there was something about the last half of it just felt really good. It was maybe the last third where I'm like connecting with like it woke me up for whatever reason, and then I was like, oh yeah, I'm connected to my ancestors, and oh yeah, I'm a special gift of life that's coming through now, and you know,
I know the moment.
Like all of that kind of like
I was
happened,
watching you
at the end. So it was interesting. I'm like trying to listen, and I'm listening, but I'm also like kind of like,
yeah.
You know?
That's the thing with meditations; they're trancy.
And then I perked up at that part. That was the part that I paid attention to. So
Yeah. They're trances. If it's a large enough group, I usually have one person who says, I'm going to listen to the recording late yesterday because I just had a little nap.
Yeah.
What's amazing to me is how many times I've fallen asleep or thought I did in something like that, only to respond quite, I'm quite responsive to the instruction to come out of it. It's like, apparently I was in it and just wasn't aware of it.
Yeah. Well, again, it's a trance. So my guess is you're setting off some theta waves, and some of the more conscious processing stuff is offline, and hopefully stuff can just kind of go in.
Yeah, it's like the harder is the classic ones. Like the heart, the more you try to pay attention to the words you're listening to, just notice how easier and easier it is for you to fall deeper and deeper into trance. I'm like, all right, I want to try and get this. Okay, include the feelings, open spaces.
Yeah.
So I will listen to it later to get this.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And Tanya.
Well, I didn't fall asleep, but in the beginning it was this. They invited to feel whatever you want to feel, and about the subject, and this huge amount of fear. I mean, I was just like trembling inside.
Wow.
And there was a particular part on my blitters, and it's like the section. Of the section that,
It's a section that's great.
That was, yeah, it was. Sometimes I do meditation very often, and it's like here, or something. Here was this section, and on my father's side actually, which it seems like I have no clue about, and when you ask to feel the specific love or connection between me and them, and it felt like no way. So it was complete opposite what I would expect, because I usually feel that I
Right.
experience this, they experience that, and they're connected. It's just
Right.
like shook immediately. And this time it was just like not happening until you and I was just like doing this all the time and even trying, and it just not. It was not connected. And then you brought the angelic forces.
I could feel I needed something else. I was
Yeah.
right in there, and I went, I need
So it
something else. Yeah.
kind of lightened up the picture. So it kind of somehow, yeah, it was like it was a black and now it became white. So kind of in the visuals, and it was more calmer. I cannot say that it was totally nourishing for me, but at least it was like leveling down. Let's say that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
That's where I am. Definitely more work on that. So I require. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
done.
Yeah. No, I could definitely. I was just feeling like, how do I? So I really tapped into it last Sunday night, and so I got a new sort of piece. I mean, this is a basic constellation piece, but I felt like, maybe the black belt version of it, of when we need something bigger in the system than what we've got. So what was happening, it was the end of a constellation that had gone perfectly well. It had ended was ending very nicely. And I just checked in with the client and she was like, this is great. And I'm skeptical. It was just awesome. It was so clean. I'm sure this is wonderful, but I'm skeptical. And I just got to include something. What do I have to include? So I just brought in a representation for her skepticism. So everything's beautiful, everything's great. There's some ancestors over there, right? And I brought in, and I had her say a few things, and they were fine. And then I got it, and I had her look at the ancestors and say,
Her meaning the skepticism.
yeah, the representative for the skepticism, thank you, yes. Turn to them and say, this is too big for me. I'm skeptical. I need your assistance. Something like that. I don't remember the exact words, but that was the movement. And the ancestors were like, yeah. And the problem with skepticism is just fine. There's nothing wrong with doubt. The problem with doubt at the end of a constellation or in similar situations is the feeling like if I'm skeptical, I'll keep it from working. Right? I have to be on board, I have to believe, I have to be in it, I have to be there, and then we know it's worked. But if I have skepticism, I mean, it's one of those very, very strong narratives in this kind of Bay Area world is if you don't believe it, it won't happen. It's that law of attraction thing, right? So what I wanted to do is just find a place where she could have her skepticism and not let it be a problem, is basically. So just have the skepticism saying, this is too big for me. I really need you to help me out here. I'm small. I need something bigger. And then I just sort of checked in with her, and I could see that the skepticism was still there, but the worry about the skepticism it had found a good place. So that was what I was trying to do here. It's not the same movement, but just this instinct of something bigger is needed here. Someone with a higher pay grade, than anyone in the room right now is needed. So that's why I ended up bringing in that angelic, which is not my typical thing in meditations, to bring in something transpersonal.
In this case, I think that worked really well.
That's the big part, sort of when I started to work out was around that.
Yeah.
I will say for me, it happened and it's over had very little positive effect on me because what I was left with was it can still happen.
Yeah.
And something that was going on for me inside of it was noticing like way far back were ancestors who like didn't have this problem at all. And they were like a cheering section that was useful.
There you go. Yeah. Very frequently with these, people will be coming up with solutions that aren't part of your instructions, which means the field's at work. Yay, field. So that's all good. Might even be good to say that in the beginning, you know, the field may manifest things that I don't say. Yay. And I did feel it's over. It happened. I could feel it was like the reframe that pings off the head. And that's fine.
It did something, just a very little something.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I felt like. It's not bad, but maybe a little early on that or something. Yeah. So, and again, what I would have done is I would have written that out, not word for word, as an outline with the basic ideas in it. And then kind of read through it several times for myself. And I would find little snaggy bits like that for myself. Like, okay, what do I need before I put in it's over, it happened, it's over. I would edit it a little bit. So.
That's interesting.
Nice. So what we did here is like
my first draft in a way.
First draft. Cool.
Yeah. Although probably a better first draft than I would do just with me and a keyboard, because I've got 3 people to have it bouncing off of and to be responding to in the moment. Although in some ways not a better first draft, because the first draft I'm editing as I'm going. Like, no, that's not working. Erase. So it didn't even get said, right? Because here, once you've said it, right?
So I want to give feedback on a piece that you might use.
Please.
When we turn back and we have our ancestors behind, and because we didn't remove the angelical part, right? So it's still there.
Right.
So it's and then you said, well, you feel the
life coming through
you. For me, it was actually very. I mean, it can be mentioned just as the word or something, that it's not only from the ancestors, but also
it would have been good for me to remind us that those were there.
It was very, very powerful. It kind of you could feel like actually going through that angelical whatever force going through the ancestor.
Exactly.
So that, I don't know. For me, it was
perfect.
Something that
perfect.
Worked.
I'm so glad that you didn't forget that those were there. Absolutely. What?
I feel them.
Yeah.
I can feel them too.
Yeah. Awesome. That's great. And the moment where I felt like something really shifted, like it was good all the way along, but the place where I said the angelic folks, something like,
they see them for who they are.
Yeah, and then I said, and there's no way for any of them to be anything other than who they were.
Yes, exactly.
And I felt the whole room like go, oh yeah.
That was really nice.
There's a little bit of sleight of mouth there.
But yeah, what that brought in for me was all the being aware of the ways that I get in my own way just by comparing what I'm doing to what I think being myself should look like.
Right.
Which is a whole track.
Right. Well, and that was the only thing I knew I was going to do during the course of the thing, because I had before I started, there's this okay, so the issue is being myself, and the ancestors are always themselves. So that's the thing I got to get to somehow. That was the one, that was the only resource that I knew I wanted to get to at some point. So.
It's interesting that you didn't invite us to look for somebody who for themselves. I was kind of you usually do that. Look at the ancestor and see who had that strength to be yourself. You didn't. You decided to not go that route.
Yeah.
I'm wondering why you did.
I referred generically to people who had an easy time being themselves. That probably would have been a perfectly good thing to include as a more specific look at somebody in particular.
Those are the two dynamics. You've got the ones you're belonging with, the issue, and then you've got the ones who have resourcefulness.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Using both might be interesting.
Yeah.
You see My Heart Huckabees?
So long ago that I don't remember why I loved it so much.
One of the most crucial scenes in it revolves around the question, how am I not myself?
Right.
How am I not myself? Like if we're being inauthentic, then we're being an inauthentic person.
Right. An authentic, inauthentic person. Right. Well, and that's why Carl calls it the illusion of conflict. The illusion of inner conflict. But it's a really good illusion. It's a very strong, life-running illusion.
Seriously.
But it does begin to give us a little bit of, in theology, I remember having these fights because in theology, very frequently there's the true self and the false self. And at some point I'd be like, it's like, I'm just always myself. What is this true self false thing about? I am my true self, even if it's fucked up. It's my true, whatever it is. And yet it's still a useful framework. So it's just useful to give it a kick in the butt every once in a while. Okay, lunch.
Yeah.
We got 1:00. Come back at 2:30, please.
All right. No, did you? I did, but.